The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Tuesday, October 15th, 2019. Thanks so much for joining the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. So many things have happened over the weekend. We did not broadcast the podcast on yesterday because it was Indigenous Peoples Day, just to make sure make sure no one mistakes us for celebrating the colonizer, Columbus. We don't celebrate him. In fact, one of my proudest moments was when I got a really great corporate job when I was living in Boston. And when I went there, they celebrated Columbus Day, but they did not celebrate King Day. So they let us off, they gave us the day off for Columbus Day, but not King Day. And one of the good things about the company, and I'll just tell you the company because it was an outstanding gesture, HubSpot in Boston. What they did was they always surveyed their employees to see how they were doing. And, if you think that's just like corporate BS, well, the very next year after I complained in the survey, the very next year, it was completely inverted. We no longer took Columbus Day off and we took King Day off. Now, it shouldn't have taken me to do that. But, in a city that's only 10% black, certain things can. Anyway, that's not the point of today's show. I just wanted to say that we were off yesterday for Indigenous Peoples Day. And while we were away, it looks like the proverbial ish hit the fan. John Bolton is looking more and more like he is the whistleblower. According to sources, John Bolton instructed an ex-Trump aide to notify White House lawyers about Ukrainian efforts or about Trump's Ukraine efforts. According to U.S. News, quote, Fiona Hill, President Donald Trump's former top Russia advisor, testified to House investigators on Monday that the former national security advisor told her to alert the chief lawyer for the National Security Council about Rudy Giuliani's role in U.S. foreign policy toward Ukraine. And this is coming from the New York Times originally. So it's shaping up more and more that John Bolton is, if not the whistleblower, because the whistleblower that's mainly in question is someone who ostensibly still works in the government. But John Bolton is shaping up to be a whistleblower. And the irony of that is staggering because, the chances are, I honestly don't know. So John Bolton is the most bloodthirsty human being on the face of the planet. The irony here is that he may have actually done a good thing. What's that mean? When the worst person in the world makes a good point? This is that kind of situation. But the double irony is that anyone who can help liberals and centrists take out Donald Trump becomes a centrist hero or heroine. And it would be the greatest plot twist of all plot twists if John Bolton subsequently becomes a hero of centrism. Not just a plot twist in terms of something that's funny, haha, can you imagine that? But as in the world is upside down. I don't know the sky from the ground. The world will be so weird at that point that it won't be tolerable. Being a little dramatic, but you get the point. So, we have to keep our eye on that issue. Then yesterday, while we were all for Indigenous Peoples Day, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg responded to a report that he hosted a dinner for conservatives. And it was basically a brainstorming session, kind of chopping it up, just kind of discussing the fears of conservative censorship. And Mark Zuckerberg responded to that story and basically said, if you've never talked with someone with opposing ideas, I recommend it. Well, look, Mark, let's be sure. We understand the game. We understand the gig, the jig. We understand it because we've seen over the years two things happen. Number one, the regular crushing, not just shutting down, not just canceling, but you can keep your page, but the effect of your page, the efficacy of your left-wing page It's destroyed on Facebook. So many pages. I know people who lost jobs, entire companies, left-leaning publishing companies that went under because of Facebook just dropping the hammer. At the same time, Facebook, if they ever stepped on the toes of a single conservative outlet, conservatives made so much noise and Mark Zuckerberg listened. So the sum total of the events over the last couple of years, while Facebook was trying to quote unquote figure out their policies, was really the devastation of left-leaning pages. Centrist pages fared decently, right? There were a couple of centrist, basically establishment pages were unscathed. If you were establishment and to the left, just ever so slightly to the left of the status quo, you stood the risk of being destroyed on Facebook. And I know this firsthand because there were companies that I used to write for that got totally they lost all their income, all their livelihood. But if you were centrist and right, all you had to do was claim some type of conservative persecution, and Mark Zuckerberg was there to lift you up and to restore your honor and to restore your page. Just like Jack over at Twitter. Jack apologizing to Candace Owens because Twitter Moments had the audacity to call her far right. See, this is the game. This is the jig, man. This is how they get us. Because number one, most businesses in general are going to have a right-wing ideology if for no other reason than the economics of it. Right. Bottom line, like, it almost makes no sense for a billionaire or a corporation to support left-leaning policies because we're going to tax the hell out of them. So there's that's the mindset of so many organizations, and Facebook and Twitter are not above that. No matter how much they try to say that they look at how Mark Zuckerberg responded to Elizabeth Warren, saying that he's going to get in the mat and get physical with her, politically speaking, because she wants to break up Facebook. Well, there you have it. Like, that's literally, you can't tell me that a person who wasn't born a billionaire, maybe he was born with plenty of economic privilege, but he wasn't born a billionaire, and then he becomes a billionaire. You can't tell me that he is not preeminently concerned with the economics of his billions of dollars. You can't tell me. You can't tell me that he is not salivating at the opportunity to pay even less taxes than he does right now. And so it's a game where they try to make you think because they are moderately socially liberal, right? That actually makes sense. They have a modicum. Let me change my first word. They have a modicum of social liberalism because maybe they support LGBTQ rights, right? But that's it. And when the rubber meets the road and it comes down to the economics of it, they are as far right as anyone else. So when Mark Zuckerberg hosted this meeting, he hosted people like Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, who is parroting on his show night after night literal white supremacist points. I would play it here, but it's 2 minutes long. There's a video from Media Matters. Whether you like them or not, doesn't matter, because there's a video juxtaposing Tucker Carlson's show last night on indigenous people with white supremacist talking points from avowed white supremacists. A video of an avowed white supremacist saying almost word for word what Tucker Carlson said on his show last night. And this is the person that Mark Zuckerberg brought to dinner because he thinks we should chop it up with people with differing ideas. The game is stacked against us, and the only advantage we have, quite honestly, is the fact that we can't entirely be shut down, right? If they could, I guarantee you, Facebook would 100% shut down anyone who said something that threatened their economic bottom line. But them making a move like that would ultimately backfire because of the rallying of the troop effect. But don't get it twisted. Facebook is not our friend. Twitter is not our friend. Google is not our friend. And we have to use those platforms because right now that's all we have. So keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
And as always, at this point in the show, I'd like to take a second to thank all of our newest patrons, without whom this show is not possible. Not at all. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron today. Special thanks to our newest patrons, Ingrid G. Ingrid, thank you so much. Corey W. Corey, thank you so much for becoming a patron. And I feel like maybe I didn't say, I remember saying Ahern J. Thank you again for being a patron and supporting the show. I am just got through discussing some things with my partner, and I'm tempted to put out my first short story. It's the novel is actually a collection of short stories that are interconnected, just to give you an idea. And the first couple are completely finished, and I'm thinking about just going ahead and releasing at least one to the patrons. So if you need an incentive, an added incentive over and above just supporting the Benjamin Dixon Show, then by all means, go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show. Like yesterday, we did a video, and we might get these short stories out to them first. There's all kinds of reasons why you should support the show. All right. Let's get to the news. More news. So there's a big question about King James, LeBron James, #LeBron James. And, well, hell, I'll play the audio for you. Take a listen in.
Yeah, LeBron, how would you describe the trip and all the political noise that you and your teammates just went through?
I think when we talk about the political side, I think it's a very delicate situation, very sensitive situation. And for me personally, I think if any of you guys know me or always cover me, you guys know when I speak about something, I speak about something I'm very knowledgeable about, something that hits home for me, something I'm very passionate about. And I felt like with this particular situation, it was something not only was I, not informed enough about, I just felt like it was something that not only myself and my teammates or our organization had enough information to even talk about it at that point in time, and we still feel the same way.
How do you think the league handles the situation overall?
I'm not sure. I'm not here to judge how the league handled the situation. I just think that, when you're misinformed or you're not educated about something, and I'm just talking about, the tweet itself, you never know the ramifications that can happen. We all seen what that did. Not only did for our league, but for all of us in America, for people in China as well. And sometimes you have to think through things that you say that may cause harm not only for yourself but for the majority of people. And all
right, so LeBron is referring to Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey, who tweeted several weeks ago support for protesters in Hong Kong. And LeBron there is talking about Morey not being informed. Now, he tried to come back later on and qualify what he actually meant. And he was talking about the livelihood of NBA players and even the safety of NBA players playing in China. But this is a complicated story. No, the story is simple, but the analysis that I have to give is going to be rather nuanced. So buckle up to be upset and buckle up to be satisfied, because I'm going to say something that's probably going to confirm what you believe, and I'm also going to say some things that's going to piss most people off. First and foremost, let's start here. China is not communist. That's where I want to start. And if I start there, then I can explain why that's important. Number one, a lot of the critics of LeBron James are saying that he's in league now with the communists. China hasn't been communist since the 70s when Nixon opened up the Chinese market, probably before that. But they are the quintessential example of state capitalism, right? There is a singular party that calls themselves the Communist Party, but they are as communist as Russia is communist. And we see Russia operates and behaves exactly like an oligarchical capitalist society, because that's what they are, and that's what China is. They have a one-party system, which is not equivalent to communism. In many regards, we in the United States have a one-party system, and we just get two sides of the same coin, Republican or Democrat. But I think we got to establish that in this conversation first and foremost. So China is not a communist nation. They do not have a command economy except for that which the single party system maintains a grip on. But they're open. Their markets are open, man. And that's what this is about, right? You can't criticize LeBron James in the context of calling of the Red Scare, of calling China communist, because this is literally about capitalism and how capitalism has a global control over everything. The reason NBA players, this is NFL season, guys. I'm sorry, I don't even want to be talking about the NBA right now, as you can tell. I want to talk about my Saints. But the reason NBA players are either prevaricating or prostrating themselves before the Chinese is because of capitalism. It's because of all the money that's locked up in consumerism in this. And I can't say it's new, but I would say China is on the ascent in terms of their consumerism, right? The middle class. I mean, you're talking about 1 billion people in China where they are now developing a middle class. They've always had an elite class. They've always had the privileged at the very top, but now they're developing more of a middle class over the last decades. And now the disposable income is such in China that they can just consume frivolous things like we do in the United States. And you know what that means? That means that free for all for every Tom, Dick, and Harry that has something to sell to China. So it's not only the NBA, it's also people who, we're not making widgets here in the United States anymore. Most of our widgets are being made in China. But the point is, whoever is making a widget wants to break into China. And the reason for that really kind of rough overview of the political economy of China is because you have to understand, if you're going to criticize LeBron James, it cannot be in the context of calling him a communist or being in league with communism. It's about him, bending over for capitalism, first and foremost. Even if you don't agree, wherever you fall in terms of the protests that are happening in Hong Kong and the relationship between Hong Kong and China, it's kind of besides the point, because the only reason James Harden said what he said last week was because the Houston Rockets had to make sure that they didn't mess up their bag. So the overarching theme here is capitalism, not communism. That's number one. All right, so number two, and this one is a little tricky, but more often than not, I stand in solidarity with subversive forces to a limit, right? There are friends of mine in circles that I run, they go way further than I would. But I generally agree that it is a good thing for the people to rebel against their government whenever that government isn't doing what the people think it should do. The problem is that you often find, like with Catalonia, their independence movement from Spain. Spain was, at the time, had a moderately left-leaning government, and the rebellious forces had more of a right-leaning overall theme. There were some left-leaning tendencies in that rebellion, but the overall theme, the Catalonian movement, actually consisted of capitalists who were rebelling against the left-wing politics and economics of the coalition government in Spain. So there are instances where I'm not just going to jump on board with every single thing that calls itself a rebellion. And then there are some times where a rebellion can be legitimate, but I'm only going to go so far with them because that's just me. You make up your own decision. But why am I saying this in context of the protesters in Hong Kong? Well, from all indications, from everything I see, and I'm going to discuss one caveat to what I'm getting ready to say, but I'm going to say it first and then give you the caveat. We should be standing behind the protesters in Hong Kong on the merits of what's happening. just to give you a brief context of what's happening, all of this, everything that you see protesting, all the protests that you see happening in Hong Kong right now, they are centered, at least originally, they were centered around the fear of legislation in Hong Kong that would allow mainland China to extradite prisoners or suspects to be tried in China, where the court system is dominated by the one-party rule. And while the excuse for this was the case of a man who killed his girlfriend and escaped to Hong Kong to avoid extradition, which gave the opportunity, it created the opportunity for an extradition treaty or agreement in this case. This opened up dissenters who live in Hong Kong or dissenting voices that escape from China to Hong Kong. It opened them up to be extradited by this one-party system. This one-party system that has the label of communist. So, a lot of leftists jump on and say, oh, they're communists. Well, I can't say a lot, but some. In fact, it doesn't help that centrists and Republicans call them communist. Because then if centrist and it's just a cluster. It's a cluster of okay, I'm going to give it to you. China is not communist. But when centrists insult China and they use the Red Scare and say, oh, they're communists, then that makes leftists tend to stand in solidarity with the government that is being criticized by American centrists. When in reality, I don't care what centrists or Republicans say about China. China is a capitalist one-party system that has prison camps, that literally is rounding up Muslims and putting them in re-education camps. Right. We see it's not only the very worst of capitalism, but it's also the very worst of authoritarian rule. And I remember, can I just take a tangent real quick? Because this is a big subject and that's probably going to be the last thing I talk about today because we're already at 22 minutes in the show. But I remember listening to NPR years ago, back when I thought NPR was a decent organization. And I remember hearing a guy, I can't tell you who he was because honestly, I searched high and low. I had the topic, I had the quote, and I had the date range, and they scrubbed this from NPR completely. I'm completely convinced that what I'm getting ready to tell you was scrubbed from NPR. It was an American diplomat who said that China had the better system because they did not have any impediments to their economic growth. And by impediments, he meant dissent, opposition parties. Literally, an American diplomat saying this about China. And this is what we have in China. And so there's this weird thing happening, right, where anytime we find American centrist or American intelligence agencies or anyone opposing a thing, a lot of us on the left have a knee-jerk reaction to support it. But in this rare case where we see American centrists and Republicans who are labeling China as communist incorrectly, what they are saying that is correct is that China is authoritarian. And the reason I support Hong Kong, the protests in Hong Kong, above and beyond fighting against the extradition treaty, is because when you have capitalism and authoritarianism, you literally have the worst of both worlds. As screwed up as America is, we can actually protest. Whether or not it makes a difference, that's totally up to you. Decide whether or not our protests make any difference in this system. Fine, that's up to you. But we do not stand the risk of being imprisoned because we have a dissenting voice from the government. I mean, we don't. Like my show, if I was in China right now, saying what I'm saying right now in China, I would be arrested. Now, there's the other side of it where people are like, well, you got to criticize your own country first. Yeah, man, screw America. Goddamn America. America is almost right there with China. Almost 1-to-1 with China, with the exception of I can literally sit here and say goddamn America and not go to jail. Okay. And I can convince a lot of other people that America is screwed up and not go to jail. And I can organize. Now, the biggest impediment here in America is that I don't have the billions of dollars necessary to make a firm opposition. But that does not stop me from convincing every person I know that America is screwed up and we need to do something about it. Just saying that one sentence in China would get me put in prison. So there is a difference, even if it's not a big enough difference for you. You can't deny that there's a difference. Okay. So that's one of the reasons I stand with the protesters. Now, here's the thing. When you stand with protesters, there's a big mix of people who get involved in that protest. And not everybody in this protest against China, particularly this legislation, which, if I'm not mistaken, they were able to get rid of, and the protest continued. You don't know everyone's agenda. That's a critical point. Now, one thing LeBron said that was true is that it is a very complex situation. And I would venture to say that he is absolutely correct in the sense of NBA players' safety when they have to play in China. And number two, very loosely, because I don't think China really wants that smoke, right? I'm not going to play that up too much because China doesn't want that. They're not going to take they don't really want to take any American, period, but not an American basketball star into custody. They don't really want that smoke, but it's a possibility. We never know. And then number two, you are messing up people's bags, right? But you have to ask yourself the question, which is the point of this entire segment, is how far are you going to go for that bag? How far are you going to go for that money? How far are you going to go? What are you going to turn a blind eye to? Is it okay? Are we really going to be okay with getting in bed financially? I'm not talking about country, because America has been in bed with China for a long time. We've been okaying everything over there. They've been okaying everything over here, right? Neither empire cares about what the other empire is doing so long as the other is funding the expansion of each other. That sentence made no grammatical sense, but I think you got the point. The point is that how far will people go to be successful in capitalism? How far will America go? How far will the NBA go? How far will LeBron James go? And what we see are people who are willing to go all the way to saying, listen, we don't really know anything about what's going on with those protesters over there. But we won't say anything about it, and we're going to apologize. And we're just going to feign ignorance instead of taking a few minutes to educate ourselves, or a few days to educate ourselves. And this is not just LeBron James, mind you. This is America. So while we're criticizing LeBron James, keep in mind the movie industry is doing the same thing. Most tech companies are doing the same thing. Damn near every single video game company in America is doing the same thing, because above all else, we want access to the Chinese market. So what's the moral of the story? Moral of the story is, number one, let's get this communist thing out of our head. There is an authoritarian government, a one-party government that in a sense operates as any other dictatorial system would, that does not allow dissent, that is itching for the opportunity to get access to extradition from Hong Kong so that they can go after every single person that disagrees with the government, every single protester, every single person who is a dissenter, anyone who is remotely subversive. China would love to get their hands on them. But communism, or rather, let me start it this way. Authoritarianism is not equal to communism. Communism is an economic system. Authoritarianism is a governing system. Period. So anyone who's criticizing China or LeBron James, you're messing it up, right? Because the real criticism here is the fact of how low America will stoop. And that's everybody. That's from the White House, from Wall Street down to your street. Most everybody in this country, with few exceptions, will bow down before the throne of capitalism in order to get the bag, in order to secure some money. And while there are some leftists, this is the last part about it, there are some leftists who are criticizing the protesters because they feel like it is connected to the CIA. I still want to ask you the question is, even if the CIA is involved in this, because the CIA is involved in everything, right? And intelligence agencies from other countries are similarly involved in everything. Actually, before I even finish the sentence, I have to go on one other rant. I'm sorry. I did not mean to spend this much time on China. But really, I think it's reflective of our international perspective as leftists. Because I think it's critical to understand that America is not the only empire on the international stage. Want proof? Look at who all is in China, in Africa. Everybody's in Africa. Everybody's in Africa exploiting all the wealth of Africa, all the natural resources. China's in Africa. The UK is in Africa. France is in Africa. India is in Africa. And of course, the United States is in Africa. So everyone is engaging in imperialism. Everyone is engaging in exploitative practices for the purposes of capitalism. This is another important thing. Show me a communist state, a truly communist state on the international stage. Cuba still? Yeah, Cuba. But give me some more. Well, let me tell you who it's not, right? China is not communist. Russia is not communist. China is an imperial power on the international stage that will be able to rival head to head with the United States. But do you think they're going to do that? No. And they're certainly not going to do it not in the name of communism, not true communism. They're going to do it in the name of expanding their own imperial reach and their own economic reach. They will be doing it in the name of the single party capitalist system that they have. That's critical because even if the CIA is funding the protesters in Hong Kong, China is no more the socialist revolutionary vanguard that America is. So you might find ourselves in situations where the CIA, who does nothing but evil things around the world, yes, find themselves, for whatever reason, whatever their justification, find themselves on the right side of the argument. I'm not going to have a knee-jerk reaction and say just because the CIA, it's just like saying just because the America is involved in something, it's inherently evil. No, that is an American-centric view that robs the people of other nations from their free agency, from their free moral agency, their ability to think, their autonomy, to make decisions for themselves and say, we do not like the government that is ruling over us. And I think it's important that we do that because what I'm finding is that there is a cluster F of convoluted positioning on this issue with regards to China because of everyone that is involved. But if I simplify it, here is the too long didn't read. Here are the cliff notes. Number one, China is an authoritarian system, a single party authoritarian system. And while you may compare it to the United States, the difference is I can tell you that America is a piece of shit and not go to jail. I cannot say that in China and not be arrested. It is not one-to-one. They are an authoritarian state, which has nothing to do with their economic system, which is state-sponsored capitalism. They are a capitalistic system, and they are exploiting their workers just like America's exploiting our workers. And we are exploiting each other's working class, each other's workers, in order to benefit the elite of both societies. To me, America and China are two sides of the same coin. They just get it done without the headache of actually having to run political campaigns where their buddy might be in power for the next 4 years and they're not in power. You know, that's the only difference, is that America has the two major differences. America has the illusion of a campaign, and then America actually allows dissent. And that's because America has found out something that China has not found out, is that once your government gets so big, once your population gets so big, it can absorb just about any protest. So it's not necessarily a badge of honor that we could talk about America, because America is totally capable of absorbing the protest. China hasn't learned that lesson yet, and they don't feel like going through the hassle of learning that lesson, and so they just crush dissent. That's the too long didn't read, and that was actually too long itself. But I'm not going to repeat it again because we're 34 minutes in, and I think you got the picture. So I would suggest LeBron James and the rest of them go find out what's happening. Go find out what's happening, because they're in it now. There's no turning back. They will continually be asked about it, and they're going to continuously make people upset. And here's what you have to do in those situations. Pick a side. and ride it out. Pick a side and ride it out. You can't prevaricate on these things. Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.